Imagine this. You wake up in the year 2025. The morning light filters through your window, but it's not the skyline you know. Outside, the city is a forest of marble columns and gleaming domes, highways paved with ancient stone that has been reinforced with modern steel. News screens above the streets broadcast the voice of the Imperial Senate, announcing new decrees in flawless Latin. The anchor, dressed in a tailored toga infused with digital fabrics, smiles and says, "Welcome to another glorious day of the Roman Empire." Airships glide overhead, adorned with the Eagle of Rome. The world map on the news screen is not divided into hundreds of colorful nations. It is one color, one empire, one banner stretching across continents. SPQR. You step out onto the street. The coins in your pocket still bear the profile of emperors, now holographic, shimmering with lifelike motion. Children recite verses of Virgil on their way to school, not in translation, but in Latin, the universal tongue. Skyscrapers tower above you, but their bases are wrapped in arches reminiscent of the Colosseum. A high-speed maglev train roars by, but its stations are inscribed with Roman numerals. The internet you connect to each morning is not called the World Wide Web. It is the imperial net, created and monitored by Rome's central authority, stretching from Britannia to Africa, from Hispania to the Far East. This is not science fiction. This is not fantasy. This is the world that might have been if the Roman Empire had never fallen. Now, close your eyes and picture it. A single civilization, uninterrupted by collapse, unbroken by the chaos of the Dark Ages. A Rome that learned, that adapted, that endured. No fractured kingdoms, no medieval isolation, no centuries of forgotten knowledge. Instead, progress, stability, and domination under one eternal empire. But then the question strikes. If this had happened, would our world be better or far, far worse? Because the truth of Rome is complicated. On one hand, Rome was the great unifier, binding continents with roads, aqueducts, and laws that still echo today. But Rome was also an empire of conquest, built on slavery, oppression, and blood. To imagine a world where Rome still exists is to imagine both a utopia and a nightmare. And so we ask, what if the Roman Empire never fell? Before we dive into the alternate world, let's stand firmly in the real one. Because to understand what might have been, we must first understand what was. Rome was not destined to vanish. It was not written in stone that the eternal city would crumble. It fell because of choices, because of cracks in its foundation, because of forces inside and outside that eroded its power. Imagine if those forces had been overcome. Imagine if a single battle had been won, if a single emperor had ruled wisely, if a single reform had succeeded. The entire trajectory of human history would have changed. And so, in this journey, we'll first walk through the twilight of Rome, the corruption, the assassinations, the invasions, the betrayals. We'll see why the eternal empire was not so eternal after all. And then, when we've seen the reality, we'll shift into the dream. We'll explore the roads not taken, the victories that never came, the reforms that might have worked. And from there, we'll step into an alternate present, a living, breathing Rome that spans the earth. We'll imagine its politics, its religion, its technology, its culture. Would Latin be your mother tongue? Would Christianity have remained dominant? Or would the old gods still rule our prayers? Would democracy exist? Or would emperors still sit upon golden thrones? Would we have walked on the moon 1,000 years earlier, guided by Roman engineers? Would the very shape of our identities, our nations, our freedoms be different? This is more than fantasy. It is an experiment of the mind. It is a mirror held up to history, reflecting how fragile our world really is. So, as you listen, allow yourself to wander, allow yourself to dream. Allow yourself to confront not just what might have been, but what it means for who we are today. Because when we ask, what if Rome never fell, we are really asking, what is the cost of collapse? And what is the price of survival? This is What If Wars, and you're about to step into a world both familiar and foreign, a world that almost was. Now, let's begin our journey, not with imagination, but with reality. Let's go back to the years when Rome trembled, to the years when cracks spread across its marble walls, to the moments when its fate was sealed, not by destiny, but by human hands. for only when we see why Rome fell can we truly grasp what might have happened if it had not. The Roman Empire liked to call itself eternal, Roma Eterna, the eternal city, the empire without end. And for centuries, it seemed true. At its height, Rome stretched from the windswept hills of Britain to the deserts of Mesopotamia. Its legions marched on 3 continents. Its laws bound millions together. Its aqueducts carried life. Its roads carried commerce and conquest. Its language carried identity. But eternity proved fragile. For an empire that had dominated the known world for centuries, the collapse did not come overnight. It was not a single blow, but a slow unraveling. Threads pulled one by one until the great fabric of Rome was left in tatters. The story of Rome's fall is not simple. It is a tapestry woven from many causes: corruption, betrayal, economic rot, the weight of empire itself, and the pressure of enemies pressing at every border. To understand what might have been had Rome endured, we must first understand why it fell. Power in Rome was intoxicating and deadly. Between the years 235 and 285, the empire entered what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. In just 50 years, Rome saw more than 20 emperors, most of them meeting violent ends. Assassinations became routine. Generals proclaimed themselves emperors. Soldiers turned on their rulers, and loyalty shifted with every battle. Imagine living in a world where the leader of your empire might not survive the year. Imagine taxes rising 1 month, decrees reversed the next, wars declared and abandoned within weeks, all because leadership was unstable. Rome was no longer guided by visionaries like Augustus or Marcus Aurelius. It was governed by desperation, by strong men, by ambition unchecked. This political chaos hollowed out the empire's authority. Provinces grew restless, citizens lost faith. The empire's unity, once its greatest strength, began to fracture. Rome's grandeur was built on wealth: gold from Spain, grain from Egypt, silk from the East, tribute from conquered lands. But beneath the marble and mosaics, the Roman economy was bleeding. By the 3rd and 4th centuries, the empire faced crushing inflation. Coins once made of pure silver were debased with cheaper metals until they were little more than worthless discs. Confidence in money evaporated. Trade slowed. Heavy taxation broke the backs of farmers and merchants. Many small landowners, unable to pay, abandoned their farms. Agriculture declined. Food became scarce. Meanwhile, the empire's reliance on slave labor stunted innovation. Why invent machines or new techniques when slaves could do the work? While other parts of the world experimented with new technologies, Rome stagnated. The empire was eating itself alive, demanding more and more from its people while giving less and less in return. Rome was vast, too vast. At its peak, the empire's borders stretched thousands of miles, from the wild forests of Germania to the shifting sands of Arabia. To guard it all, legions were stationed in distant outposts, far from Rome, far from reinforcements. Maintaining such a colossal defense drained the treasury. Soldiers were expensive. Armies consumed endless supplies of grain, equipment, and pay. Recruitment became harder. Fewer Romans wanted to serve. The empire increasingly turned to mercenaries, foreigners paid to fight Rome's battles. But mercenaries fight for gold, not loyalty. And when the gold ran out, their swords turned elsewhere. The very barbarians Rome once feared now filled its ranks. And in the end, those same barbarians would strike the empire from within. Rome had always been a fortress against the tribes beyond its borders, the Goths, the Vandals, the Huns. But by the 4th and 5th centuries, pressure from these groups became overwhelming. In 378, at the Battle of Adrianople, the Roman army faced the Visigoths. The empire's legions, once the most disciplined fighting force in the world, were crushed. The Eastern Emperor Valens was killed on the battlefield. Adrianople was a turning point. It proved Rome was not invincible. In 410, the unthinkable happened, the sack of Rome itself. The Visigoths, under Alaric, stormed the Eternal City. For the first time in 800 years, Rome's walls were breached. Citizens watched as flames licked the sky above their temples and palaces. The world shook. Later, the Vandals crossed into North Africa, seizing the empire's breadbasket. Without Africa's grain, Rome starved. In 455, the Vandals did what their name would immortalize. They sacked Rome again, and then came the Huns. Attila, the scourge of God, swept across Europe, his horsemen striking terror. Rome paid him tribute to avoid destruction. The once mighty empire reduced to buying its survival with gold. By 476, the Western Roman Empire could bear no more. The last emperor, a boy named Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by a Germanic warlord. The empire that had ruled for centuries was gone. Rome was not only undone by enemies and economics, it was transformed from within by faith. The rise of Christianity reshaped the empire. Once a persecuted sect, it became Rome's official religion under Constantine. Pagan temples fell silent. The old gods were abandoned. While Christianity gave unity to many, it also created new tensions. The focus of the empire shifted from earthly power to heavenly salvation. Bishops rose in influence, while emperors bowed to the church. Energy once devoted to conquest and expansion now flowed into spiritual debates. Was this strength or distraction? Some argue the Christianization of Rome weakened its warrior spirit. Others say it gave Rome a new moral foundation, but too late to save it. Perhaps the greatest reason for Rome's fall was simply this: it became too big to govern. Imagine trying to rule hundreds of millions of people across continents without modern technology. No phones, no internet, no railroads. Messages traveled by horse or ship, taking weeks or months. By the time orders reached distant provinces, the situation had already changed. The empire split, first administratively, then permanently. The West, weaker, crumbled. The East, the Byzantine Empire, endured longer, but even it would eventually fall in 1453. Rome had conquered the world, but in doing so, it had sown the seeds of its own demise. And so, Rome fell. Not in one night, not in one battle, but in a long twilight of corruption, hunger, invasion, and exhaustion. Yet, when we look at these causes, we see not inevitability, but possibility. Could Rome have survived if its leaders had been wiser? Could reforms have stabilized its economy? Could victories on the battlefield have bought it centuries more life? The cracks were real, but cracks can be mended. Collapse was not written in the stars. It was carved by choices. And so now, as we step out of the ruins of history, we turn to a different path, a path where Rome endures, a path where emperors succeed, reforms take root, armies hold the line, and the eternal city lives up to its name. Let us imagine that Rome never fell. History is a river. It flows forward, carving its path through time, carrying us with it. But sometimes in its winding course there are forks, moments where the river could have split, where the current might have gone another way. For Rome, there were many such moments, points in time when the eternal empire could have chosen differently, fought harder, or simply been fortunate enough to avoid disaster. Had even one of these moments turned in Rome's favor, the story of civilization might be entirely different. So let us step into those crossroads. Let us imagine where the river of Rome's fate might have flowed differently. In the late 3rd century, the empire teetered on the brink of collapse. Invasions surged, inflation soared, generals seized power. But then came Emperor Diocletian, a soldier with iron discipline and vision. Diocletian divided the empire into East and West, creating the Tetrarchy, ruled by 4 emperors. It was meant to stabilize, to decentralize power so no single man could bear the crushing weight of governing alone. He also restructured the military and economy, introducing new taxation and attempts at price control. In our history, the system fractured after his abdication. The Tetrarchy crumbled into civil wars, and the dream of stable power sharing dissolved. But what if it had worked? Imagine a Rome where Diocletian's reforms endured, where succession was orderly, where provinces were managed efficiently, where emperors cooperated instead of betraying one another. The unity of empire could have been preserved for centuries more. Next came Constantine the Great, who embraced Christianity and founded Constantinople, the shining capital of the East. His reign was a rebirth of sorts, a chance for Rome to reinvent itself. In reality, Constantine's successors squandered much of this momentum. Power struggles, theological disputes, and invasions continued. But what if Constantine's legacy had been stronger? What if his dynasty had secured a stable line of capable heirs? What if Constantinople's wealth and strategic position had been used to unify East and West permanently, not divide them? Rome might not only have survived, it might have thrived, blending the old strength of the legions with the new faith of Christianity. creating a spiritual and political empire that bound its people more tightly than ever before. In 378, the Eastern Roman army faced the Visigoths at Adrianople. The Romans were crushed, and Emperor Valens was killed on the battlefield. It was one of the greatest defeats in Roman history, a blow from which the empire never fully recovered. But imagine if Rome had won. Imagine if the legions had held their ground, if the Visigoths had been destroyed, if Valens had lived to reform the army. Victory at Adrianople could have delayed the great migrations of Germanic tribes, keeping the frontiers secure for centuries more. A single battle, reversed, might have been enough to keep the Western Empire alive. The empire was often at the mercy of its rulers. Some emperors were brilliant: Augustus, Trajan, Marcus Aurelius. Others were weak, indecisive, corrupt. The Western Empire's final centuries were plagued by boys and incompetence, emperors propped up by generals and toppled just as quickly. But imagine if, in those crucial years, Rome had produced one more Marcus Aurelius, one leader of wisdom, vision, and iron will. What if Rome had found its savior, someone to reform the economy, rally the legions, inspire the people? History is full of moments where a single person's leadership changed everything. Rome might have been no different. One of Rome's fatal mistakes was its reliance on barbarian mercenaries. By the 5th century, whole armies were composed of men who owed their loyalty not to Rome, but to their chieftains. These mercenaries would eventually seize power for themselves. But what if Rome had reformed recruitment? What if citizens once more took pride in serving the legions? What if the empire had invested in technology and innovation rather than slave labor, creating weapons and strategies that made it invincible? A professional, loyal citizen army could have defended the empire far more effectively than hired swords. When the Vandals captured North Africa, they seized the empire's greatest source of grain. Rome without Africa was Rome starving. But what if the fleet had been stronger? What if Carthage had never been lost? Imagine the empire holding its breadbasket securely, its people fed, its cities thriving. With Africa, the Western Empire might have endured. Each of these moments, Diocletian's reforms, Constantine's dynasty, Adrianople, stronger emperors, loyal armies, Africa secure, was a hinge in history. In our world, the hinges broke, the doors swung shut, and the empire fell. But in our alternate world, the hinges hold. The doors remain open. Rome, battered but unbroken, survives. Picture it. The year is 500 AD. Instead of a Western empire collapsing under barbarian kings, a unified Rome stretches across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Its emperors have learned from the crises. Its armies are strong, its economy reformed, its provinces loyal. The world is not fractured into feudal kingdoms, not plunged into centuries of darkness. Instead, knowledge flows without interruption, technology grows, cities flourish. From this turning point forward, the path of history itself is altered. The Middle Ages, as we know them, never come. The Renaissance arrives 1,000 years early. The modern world is born centuries ahead of schedule. The river of history has split. One branch leads to the world we know, the fall of Rome, the rise of nations, the long struggle to rediscover lost knowledge. But the other branch, the one we follow now, flows toward a Rome that never fell. And so, let us follow that river. Let us walk into that alternate present. Let us see what kind of world Rome might have built had its walls never crumbled. Close your eyes. It is no longer the Rome of marble ruins and tourist crowds. It is a Rome alive, radiant, and eternal. The centuries we once called the Dark Ages never came. The Renaissance, instead of waiting until the 15th century, burst forth in the 5th. The Roman eagle never ceased to soar. The empire did not fall. It endured, adapted, and grew into a world that belongs entirely to Rome. So what would that world look like? Imagine standing in the Senate today, not the crumbling relic of marble in the Forum, but a vast domed hall in the heart of the Eternal City. The senators are not only men from Italy, but women and men from Britannia, Gaul, Hispania, Carthage, Alexandria, Athens, Antioch, even far-off provinces in Asia. They all wear togas, though they are no longer simple wool. They shimmer with woven fibers of light, threads of technology unknown to us, yet rooted in Roman discipline. The empire has evolved into a federation, provinces bound together by law and loyalty. No longer ruled by fragile dynasties, Rome is guided by a reformed Senate and a stable imperial succession perfected centuries ago after Diocletian's vision of shared power was preserved. There is still an emperor, his face broadcast across the world each morning, his decrees spoken in Latin, but he is not a tyrant. He is a symbol, a living embodiment of Rome, while the Senate ensures balance. The map of the modern world is unrecognizable. There are no United States, no European Union, no fragmented nations battling for dominance. There is Rome stretching unbroken across continents. Perhaps a few pockets of independence remain, remote islands, distant lands beyond the empire's reach, but they are insignificant compared to the unified colossus that is the Imperium Romanum. Wars between nations as we know them have never existed. Instead, internal struggles flare like civil wars, but always contained, always suppressed by the machinery of empire. The world is both peaceful and oppressive, a single flag above billions of people. Walk the streets of New Rome, Nova Roma, or Londinium, or Carthago, or Constantinopolis, and you will hear the same language everywhere, Latin. Not the Latin of ancient inscriptions, but a living, evolving tongue, streamlined into the universal speech of the empire. English does not exist. French, Spanish, Italian. These languages never diverged. They are dialects of one mother tongue. Children from Britannia to Egypt, from Gaul to Judea, grow up speaking Latin as their first language. Literature is not Shakespeare or Cervantes, but a continuous line from Virgil and Cicero, never interrupted, never forgotten. The culture of Rome dominates the globe. Architecture is not skyscrapers of glass and steel, but towers rising from arches, domes, aqueducts, all fused with modern engineering. Imagine New York, but its skyline crowned with colossal amphitheaters and aqueduct bridges carrying water above bustling streets. Imagine Los Angeles, but built on a Roman grid, villas with solar panels shaped like terracotta tiles. Festivals of Saturnalia are still celebrated, though transformed into global holidays of light, music, and unity. Gladiators no longer fight to the death, but coliseums still roar with contests of strength and spectacle, sporting events more ancient, yet more magnificent than our Olympics. The world's culture is one culture, Roman. Religion, too, followed a different path. In our history, Christianity rose from persecution to power, reshaping Europe and the world. But in this alternate Rome, things took another turn. Christianity spread, yes, but it was woven into the fabric of Roman tradition instead of replacing it. Emperors embraced it, but also preserved the old gods. The result is not a world dominated by one faith, but a hybrid, an empire where Jupiter shares the calendar with Christ, where saints and emperors stand side by side, where rituals of sacrifice blend with the Eucharist. Religious wars, as we know them, never consume the world. There are no crusades, no reformation, no 30 Years' War. Instead, there is one imperial cult, a vast tapestry of belief that unites billions. Faith has not fractured the world, but bound it together under the shadow of Rome. And yet, does this unity come at a cost? In our world, diversity of faith led to conflict, yes, but also to new ideas, new freedoms. In Rome's world, the gods are united, but so too are the chains. What happens when knowledge is not lost? In our history, the fall of Rome plunged Europe into centuries of stagnation. Roads crumbled, libraries burned, science slept. It would take 1,000 years for humanity to recover, to rediscover the principles of engineering, medicine, and philosophy that Rome once guarded. But in this world, there was no fall, no forgetting. The works of Galen, of Archimedes, of Ptolemy were preserved and built upon without interruption. The aqueducts that once carried water gave birth to machines of steam centuries before our Industrial Revolution. The codex and scroll gave way to printing presses 1,000 years earlier. Electricity, engines, flight, all arrived not in the 18th or 19th century, but in the 8th or 9th. By the year 1000, Roman legions were not marching on foot, but carried by steam-driven machines across provinces. By the year 1200, Roman scholars were peering through telescopes at the stars, drawing plans to reach them. By 1500, airships bearing the Eagle standard crossed oceans to claim lands unknown. By 1800, Rome had colonies not only on Earth, but perhaps even bases on the moon. And today, in the year 2025 of this alternate timeline, the Roman Empire is not only global, it is interplanetary. Mars is not a dream, but a province. Latin is not just spoken on Earth, but in the domes of colonies beneath alien skies. In our history, Christopher Columbus sailed under the banner of Spain, discovering the Americas in 1492. But in a Rome that never fell, exploration would not wait until the 15th century. Roman galleons, powered by steam and innovation, might have crossed the Atlantic centuries earlier. The Americas could have been provinces of Rome by the year 1000. The Incas, the Mayans, the Aztecs, they would not have met Spanish conquistadors but Roman legions. Instead of fragmented colonies, the New World would have been absorbed seamlessly into the empire, its peoples Romanized, its resources flowing into the imperial treasury. The Columbian Exchange, horses, crops, diseases, would have happened earlier, reshaping the global environment long before our timeline. The age of exploration would not have been an age of nations, but of Rome. But what of the ordinary person? Picture yourself as a citizen of Rome today. You wake in a domus apartment, its walls of concrete perfected by 2,000 years of innovation. A mosaic of solar glass on the ceiling powers your home. You sip wine from vineyards that have been cultivated since antiquity. Eat bread made from African grain, delivered by maglev trains that cross the empire in hours. You go to work in a world where Roman law governs every contract, every dispute. Your rights as a citizen are protected by codes stretching back to the 12 tables. Education is universal. Philosophy, rhetoric, mathematics, all taught from childhood. Libraries are vast, containing not only scrolls and codices, but holographic archives of 2 millennia of uninterrupted knowledge. In the evening, you attend the games, not blood sport, but spectacles of technology and strength, gladiators competing in contest watched by billions through the imperial net. At night, you pray, perhaps to Christ, perhaps to Jupiter, perhaps to both, and thank Rome for the order it has preserved. You are Roman. The world is Roman. Humanity itself is Roman. And yet, beneath the grandeur lies shadow. An empire that never fell is an empire that never allowed freedom to blossom as it did in our world. There is no Magna Carta, no French Revolution, no American Declaration of Independence. Democracy is a dream smothered beneath imperial law. Innovation thrives, but always under the watchful eye of Rome. Diversity exists, but always subsumed under Roman identity. Rebellion is crushed, dissent silenced, individuality sacrificed for unity. The empire is magnificent, yes, but is it humane? Would you trade the messy chaos of our fractured world, the wars, the conflicts, the struggles, for the cold order of eternal Rome? Would you give up freedom for stability, diversity for unity, nations for empire? This is the question that haunts the alternate world. The Roman Empire that never fell is a vision both dazzling and terrifying. It is a world of soaring achievements, boundless progress, and unity unknown in our history. But it is also a world of control, of conformity, of empire without end. It is perhaps the truest reflection of Rome itself, an empire of contradictions, as capable of greatness as of cruelty. Rome, the empire eternal. The world we've imagined tonight is dazzling, magnificent, and terrifying all at once. A world of marble and steel, of Latin and law, of unity without end. A world where the sun never sets on SPQR, but as we stand in this imagined reality, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Every gain comes with a cost. If Rome had never fallen, the benefits are undeniable. Humanity might have leapt centuries ahead. No dark ages, no centuries lost to feudal isolation. Knowledge preserved, expanded, and accelerated. The industrial age by the year 1000. Space colonies by the 1800s. Medicine advanced far beyond what we know today. Wars between nations might never have scarred the earth, for there would be no nations at all, only provinces of Rome. Imagine a world without the endless cycle of conquest and destruction that followed Rome's fall. No Viking raids, no 100 Years' War, no world wars. Instead, one stable empire guiding humanity forward. Roads not broken, aqueducts not abandoned, libraries not burned. An unbroken chain of progress. For the citizen of eternal Rome, life might mean security, order, advancement, and belonging to something greater than themselves. Humanity united under one banner, one people, one Rome, but with unity comes control. An empire that never fell is an empire that never loosened its grip. Freedom, as we understand it, might never have been born. The rebellions and revolutions that carved our modern values, the Magna Carta, the Enlightenment, the struggles for democracy, all of these may never have existed. The empire's law is universal, but so too is its authority. Without the collapse of Rome, there might be no nations, no competing ideas, no sparks of revolution to challenge tyranny. The American Revolution? Impossible. The French Revolution? Silenced before it began. Even the very concept of human rights might be stunted beneath imperial rule. And what of identity? In our world, cultures flourished after Rome fell. Languages diverged, nations grew unique, traditions evolved. But in eternal Rome, all of this is Romanized, diversity reduced to uniformity, the richness of difference traded for the simplicity of one empire. Would this be progress or the death of freedom? And so we come to the heart of the question. What if the Roman Empire never fell? The answer is both inspiring and unsettling. Rome might have carried us to the stars long before our time, or it might have chained us forever beneath a single throne. Perhaps both truths exist at once: progress and oppression, unity and loss, brilliance and shadow. But more than anything, this exercise reminds us of something essential. History is fragile. Entire civilizations can rise or fall based on the choices of a few individuals, the outcomes of a few battles, the resilience or failure of a single empire. Rome teaches us that nothing is guaranteed, not even eternity. What does this mean for us here and now? It means that the world we live in, messy, fractured, chaotic, is the product of collapse. And collapse, though painful, also brings rebirth. The fall of Rome gave birth to nations, to revolutions, to freedoms that might never have existed otherwise. It delayed progress, yes, but it also unleashed creativity, diversity, and ideas Rome might never have allowed. So the question remains, would you choose a Rome eternal, a world of order and advancement under one empire, or would you choose the world we have, chaotic, divided, imperfect, but free? There is no simple answer, only reflection, only imagination, only the haunting realization that history, once different, would have changed everything. And so, as the sun sets on our journey through time, we return to our own world, the world of nations, of freedom, of conflict and creativity. The Roman Empire may be gone, but its shadow lingers. In our laws, in our languages, in our architecture, in our very idea of civilization. Rome did not endure as empire, but it endures as legacy. Perhaps that is enough. But perhaps, late at night, when you close your eyes and hear the echo of distant footsteps on ancient stone, you can still imagine a world where the eagle flies above us, unbroken, eternal. This is What If Wars. Subscribe now and join us again as we reimagine the past to understand the present and dream of the worlds that might have been.